Hi guys, we continue with our interpretation of Tolkien's symbolism from the first video. I remind you that this is just an interpretation. Interpretations can never be true or verifiable in a scientific sense. This means there may well be other logical and coherent and thus valid interpretations. The aim is just to inspire you. As the titles of the first two videos contain the term deep state, we know we need to make a distinction between two terms at this point: the global monetary elite and the global deep state. We call the richest, most powerful and most invisible people on this planet the global monetary elite, because it is the money that they control, and through money that they control mankind. These people have created a global deep state through which they control governments, economies, mainstream media, the education system and our minds, if we allow them to. Tolkien symbolized the global deep state by the King of the Ring Wraith, which we will cover in later videos. For now, we have to contend with Sauron symbolizing the global monetary elite, as they are the invisible force at the very top that is behind the negative networks and events on Earth. So now then, in the first two videos, the last one and this one, we are preparing the ground for the analysis of what Tolkien may have predicted for our time in The Lord of the Rings. Therefore, in this video we will look at the Hobbits, Frodo, the Orcs and Minas Morgul. The word Hobbit is borrowed from the English word habit. Tolkien says that hobbits are more similar to men than to the other species in his world. Men symbolize the mental areas of the human mind. Therefore, the hobbits symbolize habits in general, and more specifically our thinking habits and thought patterns. There are three hobbit tribes. We do not go too much into detail about them. The Harfoots symbolize our habits for indolence and laziness. The Stewars represent habits for activity and restlessness. And the Fellowhides symbolize habits that are free from laziness and free from restlessness. So habits serving the clarity of our mind and thus our spiritual self-realization. With only two exceptions, the important hobbits in The Lord of the Rings are all from the tribe of the Fellowhides. Only such hobbits may embark on a journey to help others or destroy something of evil. That means only spiritually conducive habits can help us towards spiritual transformation and ultimately realization. Of those spiritually conducive habits, we will now cast a specific look at Frodo Baggins. The name Baggins contains the term bag. A bag symbolizes the characteristic to absorb the things happening in our life and in our mind as if collecting it into a bag. And it is our thinking mind that has this quality. So the Hobbit family of the Baggins symbolizes all those habits referring to our thinking mind. Bilbo and his heir and successor Frodo both observe very prudently and mindfully what is happening around them and contemplate on it to their best ability to find out what they should think about it. Given this quality, they represent our common sense, our ability to think for ourselves. Ultimately, we have to find our spiritual path as a human being and fulfill our task to dissolve our impedimental concepts with our own common sense. We must assume full responsibility for the dissolution of our obstructive thinking habits and bad character traits with our common sense. We cannot delegate this task to anything or anyone. This is symbolized by Frodo, the ring bearer, who cannot delegate his task and has to destroy the One Ring by himself. In our outer world, it is also our common sense with which we must endeavor to replace the unjust system we live in by a just system. This too is symbolized by the ring destruction by Frodo. The exact meaning of the One Ring will be subject of the 5th and 7th video, and also a number of other videos that go aside talking symbolism. The 5th video will be about the One Ring within us, thus about our transformation. The 7th video will cover the introduction of a just monetary system liberating mankind and creating a fair distribution of the wealth of mankind. Now, let's look at Sauron and Frodo. Sauron tries to get Frodo into his clutches. This has an inner and an outer meaning. Within us, our ego tries to control our thinking so that we can no longer think independently from the intentions of our own ego. Our ego wants to make our thinking into a slave of its intentions. If it succeeded, we would get lost to our ego. In the extreme, this would mean to become a psychopath who can no longer recognize his selfish thoughts as something of evil that needs to be kept at bay. In our outer world, the global monetary elite, which is also represented by Sauron, attempts to steer our collective thinking ability so that we ultimately leave them the power over our mind and thus over our world and our life. They can do this only if we do not see through their tricks. And for us to not see through their tricks, they must remain so invisible to our mind that we consider all hints to their existence and their campaign for a power monopoly over mankind as a mere conspiracy theory. We may believe all kinds of things and argue over all kinds of views, but we must not use our common sense in it and must not speak out the obvious. That is Sauron's invisibility in the outer world. As long as a sufficient majority likes to believe that there is no such campaign against mankind and deny its reality, the global monetary elite, Sauron, is sufficiently invisible and can continue undisturbed. The main platform of Sauron's war against Gondor is Minas Morgul. In the history of Middle-earth, Minas Morgul has initially been called Minas Ithil and was the repository of one of the 7 seeing stones. The 7 seeing stones symbolize the mental and clairvoyant aspects of the 7 human chakras. Minas Ithil symbolizes the mental level of the heart chakra, thus the clairvoyance of the human heart. In a world dominated by ego, the love of the heart is overlaid by fear. So in our ego-dominated dark age, the heart chakra becomes a place of fear. This is symbolized by the transformation of Minas Ithil into Minas Morgul. Minas Morgul is that place where love used to guide the vision of men, and now there is only fear and terror. The human mind, Frodo, tends to be fascinated and controlled by frightening thoughts. This is symbolized at one place in the story by Frodo feeling hypnotically drawn to Minas Morgul. In our outer world, Minas Morgul symbolizes the steering of our collective mind through mind control techniques, predominantly utilizing our fears. More concretely, Minas Morgul thus symbolizes our mainstream media, controlling our collective mind through fear in the interest of the global monetary elite. MSM is Minas Morgul and Minas Morgul and mainstream media. So Minas Morgul represents the mainstream media. During Frodo's captivity in Minas Morgul, a war breaks out between two orc factions quarreling over the loot. So that last important symbol for the description of what Frodo's stay in Minas Morgul tells us about our time is the orcs. Most of Sauron's servants are orcs. Orcs have ugly, contorted faces and are evil and mean creatures, ever ready to do evil and to kill the positive figures in Tolkien's world. For the world within us, this symbolizes that orcs refer to those portions and elements of our mind with which we voluntarily or involuntarily serve the purposes of our own ego. Selfishly motivated action, so action at the expense of others, is always ugly and repulsive, symbolized by the ugliness of the orcs. It is not possible to serve our ego and our true self, the selfless love within us, at the same time. It is only either or. Therefore, our ego-motivated action extinguishes the positive impulses within us, symbolized by orcs being ever eager to tantalize and kill the positive figures in the Lord of the Rings. Now in our outer world, orcs symbolize all those organizations voluntarily or involuntarily serving the purposes of the global monetary elite. An involuntary service is rendered by all organizations only serving their own selfish interests so that they can be used to play out egos against one another. Everything and everyone, voluntarily or involuntarily serving the purposes of the global monetary elite, have a negative impact on mankind. Whatever serves the global monetary elite harms mankind because the global monetary elite strives for a power monopoly over us. So in the outer world too, it is not possible to serve the global monetary elite and the well-being of mankind at the same time. It is only either or. Wherever the global monetary elite enforce their will, mankind loses out. And in most cases this will mean suffering, misery and powerlessness for many people. In the end, liberation of mankind will be achievable only if we do not follow the will of the elites, but learn instead to manifest the required positive solutions in cooperation with one another and in a spirit of unity. For that to become possible, we need to develop an attitude of selfless service, no longer serve the Sauron within us, and we need to learn no longer to be played off against one another. That means destroy the One Ring. In the end, either the global monetary elite wins or mankind asserts itself. Both is not possible. For the specific passage in the Lord of the Rings that we are going to shed light on in the next video, we will cast a look at two special, powerful orcs, namely at Shagrat and Gorbak. It is those two orcs and their orc gangs who start a war in Minas Morgul after having captivated the paralyzed Frodo. Gorbak dreams of a comfortable life far from Sauron's tower. Shagrat is Sauron's commander in Minas Morgul. He is therefore only out to strictly execute Sauron's commands. Both Gorbak and Shagrat are orcs that were created by Sauron. Their conflict symbolizes a conflict between totally selfish forces in the collective mind. Each of them attempts to take over control over the collective consciousness of mankind. In the allocation to the events of our time, this represents a split in the power structure of the global deep state. There is a renegade faction of the global deep state that the global monetary elite created competing with the global monetary elite to gain control over mankind for themselves. In the next video, we will investigate which exact faction of the global deep state we are talking about here. Today, Gorbak's death, that has been predicted to us by Tolkien some 70 years back, is getting closer to happening in our world. That means that we are currently heading towards a decisive turn in the fate of mankind due to a war between two factions of the global deep state drawing to a close. To summarize, Hobbits symbolize our habits, and particularly our thinking habits. Frodo, the decisive figure for the destruction of the One Ring, symbolizes our common sense. It is our predominant task as human beings of our time to develop our common sense, to find a way for the dissolution of our own impedimental and self-disempowering concepts. Only then we will be able to create peace in our mind and contribute effectively to a better world in the outside of us. Minas Morgul, formerly Minas Ithil, represents that the clairvoyant love in our hearts is overlaid by fear. So in our outer world, it represents the fear control of the collective mind by the mainstream media. Orcs serving Sauron symbolize those portions of our minds with which we voluntarily or involuntarily serve our ego. In the outer world, they represent those organizations that voluntarily or involuntarily serve the global monetary elite in their quest to gain a power monopoly over mankind. The powerful Orcs Shagrat and Gorbak symbolize a split of the global deep state into two factions. Following 9/11, the two factions of the global deep state went to war with one another to gain control over the thinking of mankind and a power monopoly over our world. So now we are all set for the decryption of the events in our time in the next video. It will be all about the war between the two factions of the global deep state still raging in our time. A war that has been predicted by Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings some 70 years ago, but that will now not last much longer. Always remember, we can create in this world only what is within us. If we want peace in this world, there must be peace in our mind first. If you have any questions or ideas, leave me your comments, give me a like, subscribe my channel and spread the videos. See you.